Okay, so I know everybody loves Americans giving their opinions on what happens in the rest of the world. So I'm going to be an American giving my opinion on what happens in the rest of the world. Par for the course. We like to stick our noses in things. It's part of who we are at this point. So we're going to talk about what I think about the British monarchy, and specifically how positively insane I think this whole state apparatus for the Queen's funeral has been. Now, I'm not one of those people that thinks that, like, the outpouring of support that the Queen has gotten recently is, like, terrible or awful or unjustified. Like, she was a beloved public figure. Whatever you think about her actual record or the actual things that she did, she was a beloved public figure. And that sort of outpouring of mass support happens here in the United States with all kinds of people, celebrities, politicians, rarely politicians in the US, but politicians sometimes. Astronauts, yeah, like, pardon me, my nose itches tonight. Astronauts, anybody who's in the public eye that has a well respected reputation will receive a massive outpouring of support. What they don't get in America, no matter who they are, is a multi-million-dollar state apparatus dedicated to, like, remembering them. That just seems bizarre to me as an American, that somebody of important public stature dies and the state foots the bill for the funeral. Like, that does not happen here. It doesn't matter who you are. Like, maybe if a president dies in office, they'll get, like, a procession. Maybe the funeral will be put out. Hey, conspiracy theory video. I mean, potentially, if you have any specific conspiracy theories you would like me to look at. But I don't know of any off the top of my head. I usually don't go down the conspiracy theory rabbit hole. But thanks for joining chat. I've only talked to one person on chat, and it was hilarious. It was a good time. We talked about the Queen that time too. But yeah, I don't understand this state apparatus that the Queen gets for her funeral. It makes no sense to me as an American. Like, yeah, I mean, but to be fair, nothing about the royal family makes a whole lot of sense to me. Like, the way the state supports them, because it just doesn't happen that way here, and it just seems so, like, archaic and so behind the times that this much wealth would be concentrated in one family with this much state apparatus support behind them, just because they happen to be the descendants of the person that conquered the last person that conquered the lands from the last person that conquered the lands from the last person. Like, come on. It feels like we moved on from that already. And, like, I just don't get it. I don't understand why the British people would let them have all that. I mean, their fortune is worth like $28 billion, and it was built entirely upon the backs of taxpayer money over the course of like 1,000 years in Britain. And it just doesn't, I just don't understand why they haven't like relegated the monarchy to, at most, like a public position with a salary, but you don't get to use any of the buildings that the country built, because that's how it is here. The president gets to live in the White House, but as soon as he's not the president anymore, you can get the fuck out. And it's the same with Congress. None of the senators or the Congress people have any claim to any of the infrastructure that they use to do their job. They're just allowed to use it to do their job, so they can't profit off of it. Tickets sold to tour the White House don't go into the pockets directly of the president, but tickets sold to tour like Buckingham Palace go directly to the royal family because they like own Buckingham Palace. I don't know if they own Buckingham Palace, but I know they own like Balmoral Castle, and they own castles in all over the country. And like anything that happens on those grounds is like their money, even though these castles have been like maintained and paid for with taxpayer money. It's like, no, you don't get to, you know, for me, you don't get to profit off of a state apparatus that has given you everything that you get. Like, you don't get to take the spoils of what the taxpayers pay for. It makes that what? Like, in my opinion, the British monarchy should be given a salary like the U.S. president is given a salary, because even though I don't like kings and queens on principle, they have been a fairly steady hand in the public eye that sort of like cools off political atmospheres going on in the country, which is one of the problems that the United States has, is like, you know, the country can ping pong back and forth between positions, especially now, because there's no like steady hand, you know, even projecting some steady guidance in the country. It's like Biden does this, Trump comes in and does that, Obama does this, Bush does that, and it's like and there's no continuity between them. Whereas with the monarchy, they've kind of been steady, and they've sort of kept the same outlook and the same sort of behavior the whole way through. And while I don't think they should have any political power, there's value, I think, in having a public face for your government that is just consistently putting out a consistent outlook on what's going on. And because the most important thing for a country is stability. So and it's the confidence that if you make a decision in the country, it's not going to immediately get derailed by whoever comes in next. And that helps spur the economy. It helps keep everything running with like a well-oiled machine. Even if changes happen, just the projection of stability is enough to make people comfortable to take risks, to buy things. Because even if there's no recession happening, if people think there's a recession coming, they'll stop buying stuff. They'll quit buying luxuries. They'll start stashing money, and like that's not what you want. You want the economy constantly churning and constantly moving. And even if the actual policies are changing in the background, if the people think everything is going steady and they can predict what's going to happen in the future, they'll behave that way. So there's a value to having a steady hand, which is why I think that given the fact that the monarchy's been a steady hand, they should probably be given a status kind of like a president, where they get some money. Where they get some money. They're allowed to use the government facilities to do their duties, and they're allowed to use the power of the office to do their job. But if they don't do their job and they don't follow the rules that the government has set upon them, then you can just fuck off, essentially. Because like what does Britain need you for at that point? The British already govern themselves. Like, technically, the monarchy has the power, but they don't use it because the British people expect to be able to govern themselves. They expect to be able to vote and be a democracy, even though legally the only reason they're a democracy is because the monarchy lets them be a democracy. But, you know, interests align in that situation. So the monarchy wants to continue having their Scottish castles, and the people of the country want to continue to be able to vote. So as long as the British people think that the monarchy is not getting in their way and they're letting them do what they want, then they don't have much of an incentive to get rid of them. But the current way the monarchy is structured seems a little optically terrible. Does that stability work because of the system they have in place to almost limit the power of the royal family? For example, Putin is and has been the face of Russia, while not as long as the Queen, but for a long time compared to the U.S. president. First time it was like 2000, maybe 2001. Well, the stability doesn't have to be in the system. It has to there has to be a projection of stability, because economies work just simply because people think that if they spend some money on a TV, that then their rent bills aren't going to go up so much that they regret buying the TV. Or a business can start a business and know that the market that they're going into, that they've done their research on, that they think they have a product they can sell, isn't suddenly going to be upended and now they've been made redundant. So, like a good example is up here in Cleveland, there's a lot of there's Dave's Hot Chicken places going in. I actually ate there today. It's really good, but it's a fast food fried chicken joint that sells kind of expensive hot chicken. Like, it's good, but it's pricey. And so they're betting that people are willing to spend the money on their hot chicken. But if they build out 5 restaurants and then boom, the economy changes and everything goes to shit, and now nobody wants, everybody's penny pinching. Well, they're going to go to, Raising Cane's or Popeyes or Bojangles, where they can get a chicken meal, arguably not as good, but it's like half the price. And it could potentially put Dave's out of business. Now, if the guy that's opening Dave's is not confident in his ability to turn a profit with his business model, by no fault of his own, just afraid that the economy is going to fuck up, then he won't do it, or at least enough people won't do it that it'll cause a recession. So it's not wholly important that the system stays 100% stable, because the system has to adjust with the times, at least to some degree. It just has to be a projection of stability, so people are confident to spend their money, that no massive changes come along that it ruins everybody's plans. Now that's going to happen occasionally. Recessions are going to happen. Our system is a debtor's system, and the upside to the debtor's system is that you can constantly be creating new money for people to use, but the downside is eventually the money creation gets a little bit too hot and it's got to cool off. And the cooling off of the debtor's economy means you have a recession. That's just how it works. And nobody wants that, but it's part of the cycle of the way that we do business. And you can tweak around the edges to help that out. And it won't change the perception of the public. You can try to make the boom and bust cycle better around the edges, but people aren't going to respond like you're trying to change things. They're going to respond like business as usual, which is what you want. If you take the whole system and just pluck it right out and throw another one in there, nobody's going to do anything business-wise. And this is what happens. This is what happens with all countries that have a steady figurehead, like Putin. Right? Putin has been remarkably stable with his approach to the economy in Russia. Which, to be fair, in Russia, it's mostly been like, hey, me and my buddies get to keep all the profits. You and your Russian people can, we'll give you enough. You'll have enough. You're not going to have the nicest TVs. You're not going to have the nicest cars. You're not going to have the best iPhones and the best cell networks. But, it's going to be fine. You'll have electricity. You'll have heat. You'll have food. And we're basically just going to leave you alone. And that was pretty much the social contract that Putin made with the Russian people to get into power, which is like, we're not going to turn this ship around. We're not going to suddenly become, the world's largest country with an aggregate wealth per capita of Singapore. But what we are going to do is we're going to create some stability, and the government is going to leave you alone. If you want to start a restaurant in Russia, we're not going to screw with you too much on regulations. Just start the restaurant. Go right ahead. And that's generally been how Putin has stayed in power and stayed so popular. Also done some shady stuff, a lot of shady stuff. But the people haven't revolted against Putin because he's remained relatively consistent with his approach to politics. And he's thrown that completely out the window with the whole Ukraine thing, because now he's got a draft. Now the government is getting involved in people's lives. And there's a mass exodus of people leaving Russia, just poof, getting on planes and filling up Turkey, because Turkey's one of the only countries you can go to from Russia without a passport. and like just like plane rides out of Russia to Turkey are booked for months, and the price has like tripled. So and nobody cares. Like Putin fucked up so bad that like the Russian people are like spending life savings on tickets to get out of Russia, and that wasn't happening before, despite their low standard of living compared to their Western European counterparts, because it was stable. They knew what their life was. They knew what they needed to do. Now they have no idea, and that's what's screwing it all up. So there's a value to that steady hand, and Putin's a good example of how when you don't have that steady hand, shit goes haywire real fast. So anyway, in the instance or scenario where Putin is removed, that change for better or worse is almost guaranteed to shake their economy to its core until a new normal settles in. It depends on what the next person does. So economies will recover. It takes some time, a couple of years, on like the low end to decades on the longer end. But if the next person comes in and basically just resets the clock and just like we're leaving Ukraine can have your land back, and we're just going to go back to business as usual. We're gonna try to repair our relationships with the rest of the world. We're going to start selling our oil again. Then the Russian economy will level off realistically and probably in a couple of years. They'll still probably be down compared to where they were before the Ukrainian invasion because there's a lot of trust that's been broken between countries that they did business with. But it would probably recover in a couple of years. But if somebody comes in and goes like, all right, all the oligarchs, all the people that own all the state industry, get the fuck out. Like, you're done. We're taking the country. We're taking all this stuff over. We're going to give all the spoils of these state-run businesses and state-owned businesses that are run by all these Russian oligarchs that own. Do you know that Russian oligarchs literally own 10% of all the super yachts in the world? Like, they're stupid rich. But so kick all those guys out, and we're going to give the spoils of this state-run enterprise to all the people. That's great. That's awesome. All these people suddenly have a source of income, whether it be like tax incentive or something like that, where that they can use to improve their lives. But it's going to then raise a bunch of questions. So like, okay, what am I now allowed to do? Okay, I'm allowed to do this. All right, I can sell to these people. I can do this. Like all that has to be figured out through the entire population, which takes time. Business deals have to be realigned to match with the new government. International business deals will have to be made back up because, like, the United States is not just going to trust some government that takes over for Putin and decides to do all these great social changes. Like, all right, prove you're going to be a good partner long term. And all that stuff takes time before everything finds new normal. And so any shakeup of the system, massive shakeup of the system, will almost certainly have a depressing effect upon an economy until the new normal is reached. And how far from the previous stable system that you had tends to determine how long it takes to recover. But it also depends on a lot of things. So like Japan. Yes, that's the concern. That's the big concern with Russia is like if everything becomes unstable again, that country has a habit of falling into some level of fascism. The Soviet Union was more fascist than the current Russian Republic, but they're both definitely fascist in their tendencies. And it always seems to be run by the well-connected and wealthy people, and the democracy part of it always seems to be like a show. So that's true that seized assets could very well end up in another new generation of Russian oligarchs. It's happened quite a few times actually in Russia, but yeah, it like went in Japan after World War II. Like the United States went out of its way to reconnect Japan with the rest of the world economically. We helped them rebuild the entire country. We helped them get their industrial sector off the ground. We encouraged American businesses to do business in Japan. So Japan was the first China. So, that's why a lot of older people have a bad taste in their mouth about like Japanese products, is because after World War II, Japan was the first country that jobs started going to. And it was because the United States was trying to build up Japan. And as a result, Japan went from just absolutely destroyed after World War II to like world class manufacturing and high tech in like 30 years, which is stupid fast. And the only country that consistently seems to rebuild faster than that is Germany. Germany is an absolute. Those people, the German people, are crazy good at like taking it on the chin from a loss and then just rebuilding and just building the best stuff in the world. And so those are two exceptions. But then you'll have situations like Mexico, where Mexico will, setting aside all the things the United States does in Latin America that's shitty. But Mexico has like a very kind of like steady sort of at the wheel growth rate, but they're not explosive. And the growth in Mexico does not go particularly fast. They have their moments, but it sort of stays steady over time. And Canada's the same way. Canada just kind of chugs along. It gets more and more income per capita. It gets more and more GDP per capita, but it doesn't just do this like poof that Japan did and Germany did, South Korea did. So the stability is important, and then you end up with for long-term growth like Mexico and Canada, and instability without any help results in things like Venezuela, where Venezuela, the government enacted a lot of really good social plans to help out the people, but did so very rapidly and did so by taking on a bunch of debt. But the debt was in foreign currency. So they had to pay the debt back in foreign currency. So the way that works on the market is you basically take your money and buy their money and then send them their own money back. So in Venezuela's case, if they want to pay bills in American dollars, they have to buy American dollars on the international market to pay their bills to America in dollars. I don't know what the breakdown of Venezuela's debt is for America. I actually don't think it's that much, but regardless, this works for all countries. So when Venezuela has a lot of social change, takes on a lot of debt, and the people in the international community can see that debt burden growing and growing and growing, they start to get cold feet. Like it's moving too quickly. Even it looks like it's moving in the right direction, but it's moving too fast. People don't know what to expect next. So Venezuela has to skate on their oil reserves because international investment in the country isn't coming in at a rate fast enough to outpace the debt that they're taking on because they're moving too much too fast. And then oil prices crash and boom, the Venezuelan economy just gets wrecked because all of their income is coming from oil, and their oil is paying all this debt that the government is taking on to fund all these social programs. And once the oil money dried up, they then had to take on more debt to pay the debt that they already had. Yes, Germany did take on a lot of debt post World War II, and but they just absolutely killed it because they found their niche market in Germany and just straight to the moon. And what Germany did was, well, let me finish the Venezuela thought. So Venezuela, their oil wasn't worth as much anymore, so they couldn't pay their debt. So everybody in the rest of the world starts to see this ballooning debt problem that Venezuela has to pay in their money, pay back in their dollars. So then the international community doesn't want their dollars anymore, at least not at that rate. Like the perception of their dollar was that it was worth less. So in order for Venezuela to import food, they had to pay more of their dollars to get that food, but they weren't making as much money off of oil, so then they had to take on more debt. So then they had to take on debt to make up the loss from the oil, and then take on debt to service their debt, and then take on more debt from the thank you, sir, see you later. Then they had to take on more debt to so then they had to take on more debt to service or to buy the food because their dollar was decreasing. And so it was just this vicious cycle that ended up steamrolling the whole country. And it got so bad that Venezuela ended up just getting rid of their dollar completely and starting over from scratch with a new one. But nobody knows how well that will work in the future. So, I lost my train of thought here. Oh, getting back to the British monarchy. So the British monarchy has a net value of $28 billion that they have gotten off of the taxpayers. And I do not think that they should have this. I think that they should be basically turned into public servants. They should be given a salary, a comfortable salary, because you don't want them taking bribes. So they should be well taken care of, but not $28 billion. Like, that's insane. Give them like $400,000 or $500,000 a year each to live their life with, start their own businesses, like make people make their own money off of their own job. And then if they don't have a job, they should just get rid of them. Yeah, that's what I think about the British monarchy. We should take all the assets that the taxpayers have paid from, give them a job as the figurehead of the government, projecting a steady hand to help stabilize the perception of the British economy, and make them figure it out on their own. That's what they get. Well, that's what they should get, in my opinion.